Thank you very much. And I would like to welcome Andrew Stotter Brooks, the Vice President Learning and Development at Etihad Airways. Welcome, Andrew, and it's a pleasure having you here. I would like to start by asking you a little bit more about the current priorities for HR professionals. So, how can organizations strengthen the contributions of HR professionals in supporting the transformations that a lot of organizations are getting through now?
So I think that probably the short answer is helping our people understand the why. I think that's so beautiful because when people understand the why, they have kind of true purpose, and it's really establishing and radiating that purpose to the organization, to the team, because it really drives. For me, it drives motivation. We talk a lot about the what and the how, of course, the what we do, the human doing, but that whole piece around human being is so absolutely critical, and really taking the employee experience to to a new level. Really treating our team members as paying guests, as customers, makes a massive difference. It really changes the way they kind of see the world, and really just adding value, I suppose, making sure that everyone within the organization is adding enormous amounts of value, going to make it much easier. So giving clear structure, allowing people to make the right decisions, and making sure we're really looking for talent in perhaps unexplored locations, just really helping people to understand the value that they add to the organization. There's kind of five things that I always talk about. There's this piece around providing our employees with clarity. That's the why. Then there's obviously that piece around helping people to understand how they're doing, how they're performing. That's the feedback and the recognition. There's this piece around what I would call input versus output. That's making sure that everyone understands the role they play within the team. I suppose one of the things that frustrates me most, and I've worked for many organizations around the world, is when people say to me, I'm a juster. When I say I'm just a security guard, or just a pilot, or just cabin crew, or just a barista, or just a sales assistant, the list goes on. Nobody's a juster. Everyone is basically part of the organization, and we can't be successful without everybody understanding our purpose and why we're doing things. I think number 4 is helping people learn and grow, and number 5 is really genuinely caring about our people.
Right. We often talk about how organizations can actually can help their talent grow. But I want to know, how do you find the right talent to help the organization grow?
I think there's a couple of things I'd like to talk about there. I think the first one is making sure that we give the opportunities to everybody, and we shouldn't be too. I suppose what I would use is judgmental. Human beings we're naturally born to make judgments, and we carry around a lot of kind of unconscious bias as well. So it's really about making sure that everyone has the opportunity to learn and grow within the organization. Everyone has equal opportunity. I suppose there's kind of 4 things that really drive that for me. There's a strong desire by the employee to want to do something. That's really massive. And then of course, a lot of organizations tend to focus on you must do this. And I personally am not a huge fan of that. I think the biggest playing opportunity for us as HR leaders is really around accessibility can. And we talk about why we should do it, because those 2 things are the real kind of like the benchmark for me. Really providing an ecosystem. It's easy to understand how I fit within the organization. I understand my stakeholders, the impact I have on my guests, how I perform within my role, and basically making sure that I understand how I'm being measured, and I have the opportunity to just really raising my kind of self-awareness as well. They're really important things for me.
Now, usually when people they hire, I'm going to assume the person who fits best. But sometimes it's actually a good opportunity to hire a potential talent that can grow into the role and take it further. How can companies look for these potential, and how can they build on that to actually create this amazing talent that goes from a potential to someone who becomes a leader?
For me, it's only about attitude. You can't. I've been educating adults now for almost 4 decades. I know I look incredibly youthful and sprightly, but I've been around for a long time, and I strongly believe you can teach almost any skill. What you can't really teach is the attitude, and I think that's a really important point for me. So the more that when team members are coming to me, I suppose one of the things that maybe frustrates me about perhaps people who are applying for jobs. Many, tens of thousands of people apply to me to work with me every week, every month. I mean, it's actually quite scary. So there's a lot of competition out there, for the best talent, and for talent trying to come and work with people like me, within the industry. I suppose, my big shout out to people who are looking to work in big industry is, what are they, the value that they are adding. I think I was chatting this morning. There's kind of three things that I do: an induction every day or every week. We welcome 100 plus team members into the organization, and every week I speak for about 20 or 30 minutes, just welcome them on board and making sure that they have everything they need to be successful. And I suppose there's always kind of three things I recommend that they do. The first one is understanding how they can add value to the organization and understanding their why. So, and I'll back to our kind of Juster question we had a few seconds ago. The second one, really, unfortunately, there isn't really a hack. And, people say, oh, what's the hack? Is there a fast way to being successful? And I would say, no, it's really hard work. There's no sort of like shortcuts to it. I think we're the first generation who's actually, if you think about today's employment market, we now have 5 generations working in the workplace. So I'm kind of top end of that, but I also have my children at the bottom end of it. And there's a lot of different ways of looking at work. And I think that's very interesting as well. So I think sometimes people, maybe people call me a bit of a dinosaur, but Generation kind of X, the way that we've kind of done business is changing quite dramatically. So I think my kind of like shout out to my peer group is be more open to slightly different ways of doing things. I think that's really important. But also for my children coming into the industry or coming into the market as employees, thinking about what value you're offering, thinking about how you can use your skills almost to kind of reverse mentor, because we have some incredible technology at our fingertips these days, and people like me aren't really across it as well as we could be. And I think some of definitely my children can really help me with reverse mentoring and helping me to understand some of the best practices and really just telling us what they want from organizations.
So, Andrew, this is actually a very interesting, because we're talking about different generations within the workplace. So how can you as an HR professional actually motivate different generations to have some sort of communication and exchange learning and development trends among themselves?
Yeah, for me, it's just it sounds a bit crazy. There's probably three things, but first of all, it's seeking to understand before we seek to be understood. I think that's really important. So really listening to people. It's a devilishly hard skill to learn, listening. But I would encourage people to learn that skill and to practice that skill every day. I think that's absolutely fantastic to do that. I think the second thing is, one of my kind of mottos: people don't care how much you know until you know how much you care. So really kind of leading with that that strong sense of we care. We're keeping it human. We're keeping it fresh. And the other one is, don't underestimate the power of kind of human relationships, because people never forget how you make them feel. Right? So that's a really, really important point. And just the kind of the simple stuff, making sure that people everyone is treated fairly, equally. Sometimes I think in my experience anyway, younger generations are maybe in a little bit too much of a rush. There's this kind of word I use quite a lot, which is called, mastering a skill. So it's mastering listening, or mastering guest service, or mastering, any particular skill that you can think of. And mastery takes quite a lot of time. I would say that, you can increase the speed to mastery by increasing the challenge that you're practicing at. But sometimes when I don't really want to sort of like say I'm particularly good at anything, but if someone looks at me, they might look at me and think, actually, he makes it look very easy. But for me to make something look very easy has taken considerable mastery and considerable time and effort. I think sometimes people, until they actually try to do something, they're perhaps not as aware as they could be. So being more self-aware, allowing themselves time, challenging themselves. Typically, according to Malcolm Gladwell, anyway, it takes about 10,000 hours to master something. I would suggest you can probably significantly improve that 10,000 hours by putting yourself into a very challenging environment to go and learn the skill. But yeah, I think it's a two-way conversation between it's probably a five-way conversation between the different generations in the workplace.
Right, right. And easy to have this kind of conversation, or is it sometimes really difficult?
I think it's I think it takes mastering. I think we just need to ask a few more questions. We need to ask a few more questions. We need to be probing. So tell me, just I'm a big fan of things like the TED questions. Tell me, explain to me, describe to me. Just tell me what's going on. Tell me how you're feeling. Explain to me what situation, what's important to you. Describe to me what's important to you on there. Explain to me what's kind of going on. Tell me how you show me how you. Tell me how you're sort of like seeing this. Explain to me, describe to me what you're seeing in the given situation. Not asking or not seeking a second opinion until everyone's spoken. It's things like that make such a big difference on there.
Right. You once wrote in that we have to focus on learning, mobilizing intelligence, collaboration, innovation, and openness to new insights. And I wanted to ask you a little bit more about that. First of all, what does that mean? And second of all, how can we mobilize intelligence between different generations?
Oh gosh, it's a great question. There's that whole kind of blend between the sort of the purpose of the organization, the value the organization's offering, and the culture of the organization. Those three things are kind of playing out. I think understanding how we're operating and help giving people clarity around that's really, really important. The more that we can kind of flatten organizations, allow team members to challenge up, the more that we kind of break down hierarchies within organizations, the more that we can empower our team members, the more that we can coach our team members, ask them questions. Really, I think sometimes people like me can be blockers. We have to have a little bit more faith, a little bit more trust, a little bit more empowerment within our teams, and really encourage them. Sometimes when experience is a great teacher. Experience is a great teacher, particularly when you doesn't quite go as you'd expect it to go. And sometimes it's hard if I offer you advice on something from a position of experience, it's the lessons probably not as well learned as you experiencing yourself. So sometimes, I think when people are actually asking, when I'm coaching my team, I'm asking them questions and they're making suggestions about how they might want to tackle a challenge, a problem, an opportunity. Sometimes when they're speaking, I don't necessarily agree with their approach to that. But I'm very, very careful here, because unless if they're not endangering themselves or endangering myself or endangering our organization by their suggested solution, even if I'm not completely convinced it's going to work, I'd rather let them have a go at doing it. Because that actually, when they start to learn, when they're making decisions to do something and they're owning it, taking responsibility for it, and they're kind of going out and doing it, they'll learn very quickly that it doesn't necessarily work quite as they thought it might. And often it drives a lot more accountability and responsibility within our teams. If I just give people the answers, if I just tell you what to do and give you the instructions and tell you go and do it, when it doesn't quite go to plan, you're going to quick to blame me and telling me it was my idea, as opposed to taking responsibility and ownership for it. So yeah, it's challenging, but I would say very simply understanding that the why for me is really important. Understanding people's purpose, understanding the culture we work with, understanding different values that we're aligning ourselves behind, making sure that everyone plays a unique role within the team. We're all equally valuable within the team. Everyone has a contribution to make. Everyone feels that they can challenge and make observations. I think these are really important points.
I would like to wrap up this by just asking you a final question about innovation and generation gap. There is always this idea that younger generation adopts more of technology and are more broad-minded when it comes to innovation. And I mean, we have seen it, different platforms. But I wanted to ask, as a person who works in an organization, that there is no room for not being keen on technology. Where does that generation differences play a role in? Do you still find it challenging to actually adopt new technologies and expand within the workforce, or people are far much more keen given the nature of your organization?
First of all, the people I work with are typically very, 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 very young, which I think is amazing. Secondly, the general population of the UAE is a lot younger. The demographic is a lot younger here. The availability to technology, to systems, to the latest kind of hardware, the latest technology, latest systems it's incredibly prevalent in the market in the region anyway. So I think that really kind of like drives it, and we're just constantly looking for new and innovative ways. It's fascinating. I shared a stage last August. I was in Johannesburg, and I was with the head of learning from Amazon in the United States, and we were discussing this identical question. And he gave me it was a big, about 10,000 people listening to us when we were talking about this. But what was fascinating was he gave some really interesting stats around what people, what they were doing in 1980, long before you were born on there. But I remember I was around in 1980. And he was saying, according to Amazon data and Google data, 80%. So 80% of what people did in 1980 from a job perspective no longer exists. So there's been a rapid shrinking of the types of work people are doing. And that's only really in the last kind of 35 years. Yeah, so there's a significant change. My kind of prediction would be in the next 10 years that will only accelerate. What won't change is our humanness. And the more that we encourage and the more that we learn to be more human and to think and really develop the emotional intelligence that we have, the more impactful we're going to be in the future. So we have the technology. One of the things I suppose that frustrates me the most is when I get asked to train people on Excel. I mean, it's one of my little sort of niggles, really, because we don't really need people to be creating data. Machines create data now. We have computers, we have incredible technology, can create and can present data for us. What we need human beings to do is be able to read the data, translate the data, apply the data, use the data. That's really important. And that comes from being a human. The machines can't take that from us. So just be very kind of mindful around how things are moving, the rapidity of that, and keep hold of your humanness.